52 past the hour, the escalating protests on college campuses over the war in Gaza have put growing pressure on lawmakers who are grappling with how to handle the unrest. An Axios headline sums it up this way: Democrats enter panic mode as Gaza protests erupt, and top Republicans announced new plans to fight anti-Semitism by holding more hearings with university administrators and potentially withholding federal funds from colleges that don't protect Jewish students. Joining us now, Symone Sanders Townsend, co-host of MSNBC's The Weekend and former chief spokesperson to Vice President Harris, and former Republican congressman from Florida, Carlos Curbelo. He's an NBC News political analyst. Symone, President Biden has faced some criticism over the handling of the war in Gaza. Is what's happening on college campuses impacting Biden's political campaign?
Well, I touched base with some of the individuals in President Biden's campaign today and asked, are they hearing a lot about the campus protests? Is it making it, is this happening? Are people coming into offices across the country, campaign offices, talking about this? And they said, no, they are largely hearing more about economic concerns and abortion. They're not, the college campuses are not driving what people are saying to them necessarily on the ground. But two things can be true at the same time, right? Just because people are not, obviously we see the people in the streets, on the campuses. I do think, though, it is important to not take, there have been a number of protests on campuses across the country. But if you juxtapose that with polling about what are the issues that young people care about, and at the top of that list, it is the economy. Abortion pops up there. But if you also ask them how they feel about the president's handling of the war, he gets low marks. To me, that says that all of the things need to be addressed. I've seen lots of things in the papers, online, on television about the protests. There were even press conferences that some of the protesters at Columbia held yesterday. I did not see any of the reporters at that press conference ask the students about how they feel about the progress that is reportedly being made, about the deal that is on the cusp that the president has helped negotiate with Qatar and Saudi Arabia to get the hostages released in a 40-day ceasefire. I have not seen or heard much about the fact that there is a real progress in normalization talks between Israel and Saudi Arabia if Israel, Prime Minister Netanyahu, does not invade Rafah and comes to the table. Hamas, right now, the deal is on the table, and it seems to be as though that they are speaking favorably about it, and we are waiting to hear if, in fact, they are going to accept the deal. So the people are in the streets because they want something to happen. Protest is the language. People go, they disrupt because they feel unheard. Well, I think that the White House and the president are hearing them, but we're not. It's like the two things are not coming together.
Yeah, I mean, Carlos, do you think that this moment could, in a way, become a movement that could have an impact on the national political discourse?
Well, Jose, it's pretty clear that the war that Hamas provoked in the Middle East has become a culture war issue in the United States now, and Republicans do perceive the opportunity to go on offense and to hold Democrats accountable. Democrats are in a difficult position because while most Americans support Israel and don't support the tactics that some of these protesters have used in the United States, a portion of the Democratic base does. So President Biden has to try to walk that fine line and nod to those Democrats who have sympathized with Hamas, who have been extremely critical of Israel, while at the same time not losing the political center. And that's where most Americans are. Most Americans support Israel in this war. Most Americans do not like what they're seeing in American college campuses. So that's why you're going to see Republicans going on offense with this issue.
Symone, how do you think both Democrats, primarily Democrats, could handle or should handle that kind of that balance, right? Protecting the right of people to protest versus the anti-Semitic chants and anti-Semitic actions by some demonstrators. How do you politically navigate that and continue to grow your support?
You stand true to your values. Anti-Semitism has no place here in America. People who are yelling and anti-Semitic chants and who are not only trafficking but acting out acts of violence against Jewish people and Jewish students, those are not folks that are on the right side of this issue. Same, the people that are spewing Islamophobic chants, those people are not on the right side of this issue. I really think we have to back up here for a second, because again, multiple things can coexist, right? It is the attack on October 7th was a terrible terrorist attack on the Israeli people. And the response to that terrible terrorist attack on the Israeli people is the Israeli government are now punishing the Palestinian people for the acts of a terrorist organization. That, I think, is something we can all agree on is not right. I do not think anyone across America believes that innocent children who live in the Gaza Strip should deserve to be bombed and lose their lives because of the actions of Hamas. And so that is why a solution here must come quickly, and that's why the negotiations happening in Cairo are so important.
And I mean, Carlos, the negotiations going on in Cairo could very well have a successful outcome. There could be a brokered ceasefire or a pause, and some, if not all, of the 130 plus hostages that are still in the hands of Hamas in Gaza could be coming out. Would that be enough, you think, to, in a way, lower the temperature of some of the people that we're seeing on our screen now that have been going and being very vocal inside up to 50 universities in the U.S.?
Well, that's right, Jose. I think for the Biden administration, it's important to get this issue off the front page, to really lower the temperature, lower the volume, hope that some of these protesters move on, because as long as this is front and center, Republicans are going to continue presenting it as a culture war issue where they have a clear advantage, according to the poll.
Hey, guys, just, as we wrap things up, I just want to bring up that I got a chance to be with Simone over the weekend in the White House Correspondents' Dinner. I saw her drive in to a hotel. I was this far from being full fanboy screaming when I saw you. I didn't, but I told you later, internally, I was.
Carlos, let me just tell you, the folks in my car, they saw Jose standing, and they're like, is that Jose? I'm like, yes, please compose yourself and get out of the car like normal people and do not bother him. He is an icon.